question that it's very important to many of us. How who do you look up for inspiration or for mentorship? Because you lead different teams, you lead a different kind of stuff around enterprise, from small companies, startup, from big company. Who do you look up for inspiration?
It's a great question. It's hard to answer, and it's I guess my answer is going to be based on I would say something I read very recently, and maybe not something I would have told you even 2 weeks ago, but I recently read about what Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, did for all of her employees after hitting a big milestone and bringing in a new partner. She gave every employee a $10,000 check and two plane tickets, 2 first-class plane tickets to anywhere in the world that they wanted to go. And, I think I was really impressed by how she acknowledged how much everyone had contributed. She honored them all in an equal way and said, we wouldn't be here without your contributions. And she did it in a way to celebrate all of that, as a community. That really stood out a lot to me. I mean, she's done a lot of amazing work, I think, for women in the workplace, mothers in the workplace. And I was just really impressed that she took an opportunity where she could have pocketed probably a lot of money and walked away. And instead she did something to pay back all the people that had helped her be successful. And I think that is something I find really admirable in any leader.
For me, I think that the latest is someone from Canada. Her name's Lindsay Shepherd. And at the time she was a grad student, and she got in a bit of trouble when she was a teacher's assistant at a university here for encouraging some difficult dialogue about differences with people. And she got reprimanded by the university that they eventually overturned. And her message was, this is how we make progress as society, is by being able to respectfully have conversations with people who think differently. You don't have to agree, but suppressing people's thoughts and ideas because they're uncomfortable doesn't help us make progress as humans. So for me, the inspiring thing is making it okay to talk about things that are uncomfortable, and being okay with saying, I'm not comfortable talking about this. Maybe we can move on to a different topic or something like that. But for me, the inspiration always seems to come from sources and people who are more in the social sciences as opposed to in the business community, especially with how things are going nowadays, right? Like we've really got to be, we've got to be willing to engage with people who think differently, and we've got to really respect other people's viewpoints, even if they differ from ours. And I find it helps me grow as a human to learn how to be more accepting and encouraging that dialogue. And the funny thing was, when she did the talk at university, she was 22. There's a lot of noise out there about how, the world is going to hell because of how youth is today. And you watch this, and it's someone who's 22 that comes across as somebody with 30 years experience. Just that level of maturity and calmness and willingness to see both sides of an argument and stuff, I just thought was great. Gave me very strong faith in the future of humanity.
Nice. Something I wonder as well is everyone, we can see or we can read everyone about leadership. However, in your experience, what qualities are lacking among today's leaders? What things, according to your experience right now, we need to focus, or we need to develop better?
I think it's more our reaction to how we see different leadership styles. I think it's not so much about the leaders themselves. There's, especially in Agile, there's a perception that leaders are always the problem. And sometimes we forget that they're people too. You've got CEOs that have high divorce rates and lots of stress, and we tend to dehumanize leaders by accusing them of not being supportive, or not being on board with change or transformation, and they're the ones resisting and stuff. And for me, it's more about understanding, having empathy, and respecting leaders, because there is no right leadership style, right? I don't think there's a very large part of the population that can empathize with the CEO of a multinational bank, because there's, a handful of people who've done that job. It'd be very hard for us to assume that we can understand what they're going through when the level of stress and anxiety at that level of leadership is extremely high. So for me, it's about understanding and respecting and having empathy for those leaders who we might think are, opposed to our views about Agile.
I love that answer. Can I just have Jason's answer? I would say the other thing, I think empathy is really, really crucial here. But I think the other thing that stood out to me when you asked your question, Ulysses, was safety. And when I say safety, I think I mean a little bit of being willingness to also fail and welcome failure as a learning opportunity in your organization, and also admit when you fail. I have a more recent client where the CIO, I've seen her go in front of the whole organization and say, I screwed this up. I thought this was going to be the right move for us, or I thought this was the right change for us organizationally. And I was wrong. And here's the reasons it didn't work. And here's what we're going to do different next time. And I think that takes a ton of courage. And I think it helps with that empathy building that you're talking about, Jason, of, I'm human, and I'm often, maybe leading a big decision or guiding the ship in a way where I'm not 100% sure that it's the right, driving towards the right outcome for the business. But I think being willing to admit when things don't go the right way also creates safety for your team and for your organization to do the same thing.
You bring to the conversation two powerful words. You talk about empathy, you talk about safety. How do you promote it in your organization? How tools or which practice do you prefer to use with your teams to grow or to promote empathy and psychological safety?
I think they're both really hard to promote right now. I mean, it's very easy to sit behind a keyboard and shut off your video and not really connect with somebody else or understand what's going on behind that camera for them. So I think empathy is incredibly hard to build right now. I'm a big fan of just very direct conversations. And I think when things get messy or hard to move past, whether it's from a safety perspective or a lack of empathy, I like to get people together to talk, no real agenda. It doesn't have to be something even very formal, but I like to just try to get things out in the open so that everybody has a chance to be heard. I think that's really often times the more we're bottling up and the less we're sharing about a situation, maybe because of a concern with safety, the harder it is to build that empathy for one another.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would add being congruent as well. So, respect yourself, respect the other, and that's your people, either as a group of people or individuals within a context. And well, you already said it, Colleen, but, being human in your first answer is be yourself and be human. We all have flaws, but we've all been trained to kind of leave ourselves behind and send our professional representatives to work. Right? So be yourself, be yourself, be human, be open to feedback. And one thing I do a lot, because I think, Colleen, I share the same, just very straight, blunt language. And sometimes that puts people off. So I like to declare that sometimes I might say, I might say something that sounds wrong. I don't mean it that way, but I don't know another way to express it. So if something pops out that I said that is not right, just say, stop and clarify it. And I'm perfectly okay with that, because that's, again, I'm not going to know if people don't tell me. So
a lot of to think and to reflect. According to your answer, what is the most dangerous threat in a leader's career? What are that thing that we need to be care of, to realize how to avoid, according to your experience? Or what would you like to recommend us?
I've got an interesting story. I was working in this large organization, and there was, the business and IT sides were kind of not really aligned well. a lot of blame being thrown back and forth. The IT side trying to make it look like, hey, look, we're doing all this agile stuff, we're awesome, and we're celebrating our successes. And the business side, the leader over there was, well, nothing's been delivered for a year, so this is all bullshit. So they actually put me in between the two to kind of coach both sides. And I was like, oh man, this is not going to end well. And long story short, in this particular industry at that particular level, if you become labeled as the executive who can't deliver, you ain't getting a job anywhere else in the city. So, you know, the stakes are high. There's a lot of anxiety around, I don't want to be the leader who's the outsider or the outcast of this group of leaders who are always successful with everything. So it creates this snowball effect of I have to put on airs and I have to pretend and I have to do these types of things. And sometimes they're just as scared as everybody else, right? But they have to kind of play the game. So I think respecting the fact that those things can sometimes be a reality is helpful for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think along the lines of what you said earlier, Jason, the notion of humility, I think, is so important in a leader. It really resonated what you said at the beginning around we tend to put the C-suite up on this pedestal of people who should know how to do everything. It's almost like when you're a kid, right? You feel that way about your parents. They can't do anything wrong. They're the people you look up to, and almost you idolize them in an inhuman way. And I think we do the same thing with leaders. And I think that having the more you put that shell around yourself as a leader, the more you're kind of perpetuating the fact that you're not also subject to mistakes and failures and bumps along the road. So I think humility is probably the thing I would say is critical for leaders to have, or maybe the inverse. To answer your question the way you phrased it, Ulysses, ego would be the thing that I think would hold most leaders back. The other word that came to mind when you were talking, Jason, is having kind of a curious spirit, right? And being open to say, I believe that this is the best way forward for us, but I'm going to be open to those other ideas, other inputs, other ways of working. Is always going to make you a stronger leader, a stronger human in general. So I think if ego is the blocker that's making you unable to explore things with curiosity, I feel like that's something that's going to hold you back.
Thank you so much. I still thinking about empathy, about safety, and the power words, as you already said. But in your organization, how do you keep your organization aligned with your vision and your vision? According to the expand geographically, you have people around the world in different expectations and different goals. How do you keep it aligned? How do you maintain the people in one diversity way with cohesion?
Well, I'll talk about pro Kanban a little bit, and Ulysses, I know you're part of this community, so you can tell me if this holds true. But I think one of the, our mantra for the pro Kanban organization is don't be a jerk, be excellent to each other. And I wish I could say we came up with that, but we stole it from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. So, but I think really what we ask everyone to do is to all be accountable to upholding that. And when you see behavior or interactions or anything in the community that doesn't feel like it fits that, that everyone is really responsible for helping uphold that. It's not my responsibility to police our interactions, or and I have had people come to me and ask, can you step in here? And my first response is like, what have we done so far, right? And what have you said? Have you said that this wasn't okay? This way of communicating, or the way that we're talking to each other isn't respectful? So I think a lot of what we try to do is make all of the members of the community or the organization owners of creating that culture, so that it's not on the shoulders of one person to enforce it.
Yeah, I think it's very similar for us too. I mean, because you're part of the Lean Change community as well. We've got the fairness clause, right? Just be fair and don't be an asshole to other people, right? Like, don't go into somebody's territory and charge 1/10 of the price, and just be nice, because I do recognize that the way the association works is people do have different objectives, right? Like their objective is revenue streams by doing these courses. So it's kind of like a collection of people, not so much like what you would call a typical team. Because a lot of facilitators, they have their own consulting business, they've got their own training business, they've got these things. So it's more or less trying to align things around playing fair and being nice. And I mentioned congruence before. You know, we've talked a lot about this with our facilitators. My goal is not to have 1,000. My goal is to have, you know, maybe 70, and that's it. And then the faucet is off, because I would much rather support the people who believe in the cause and leaving the world better than how they found it, than just collect money from people. So when people see you acting that way, it kind of spreads around and makes it okay for us to talk about this kind of stuff.
If you move forward 3 or 5 years in the future, what do you expect? What do you expect from a personal point of view or from your enterprise point of view? How do you see the world? Let me explain to the audience. To be honest, no one of these questions are delivered previously. All already happening in real time to our famous and lovely guests.
Well, the hard thing, I'm doing some work for a startup as well. So we're in the autism and Asperger's space. So we're helping with young adults who are on the spectrum find employment that's not just data science, because there's this stigma that people who have autism, they can only be data scientists, and they're computer nerds. And there's a lot of them that wouldn't touch a computer if you gave them $1 billion. So we're running a program and building a platform that helps helps people who are employment specialists for people with autism and people who have autism, to actually help them develop skills to be able to find different employment somewhere. And we're running a few national pilots right now. So when you talk about the next few years, it's hard to say, because things evolve so quickly. But I would say the overall stance is, whatever it is, leave the world better than how I found it.
Well, I mean, I think, I don't know if this will be done in 3 to 5 years, but my hope is that the big pushes that we're making right now around diversity and inclusion, especially in the tech space, are happening more organically. And I know how hard that is. I mean, it's been a big focus for us in building out our trainer community for Pro Kanban. We really want the training community to look like the community we serve. And it doesn't happen it just does not happen that way organically right now. It's requiring a lot of effort, and everyone warned me that this would happen if we just let it grow on its own. But it's taken a lot of work and time to seek out and create opportunity for women and people of color who are interested in this path and maybe don't have the means to get there on their own right now, or don't feel like that opportunity is available to them through how they're working right now. And so it's been kind of my big mission in this, to figure out how we create a lane for people and support them through this journey, so that that this looks different and it feels different. But you know, knowing now how much work it's taking to build a diverse community also makes me realize that how hard it is to get there without putting in that effort. And my hope is, by putting in all of that effort now and seeing a lot of companies really investing in diversity and inclusion at their executive level, that things start to look different for our kids. You know, hopefully this isn't still the same conversation we're having 20 years from now.
Yeah. I know. Carlos Martinez put in the chat, do you think it's possible to adopt or change a person's mindset without using a one-to-one approach? What would be your best advice to achieve that with a broader audience?
The mindset question is always an interesting one, because you can't really change somebody else's mindset. You can manage the system a little to watch different behavior emerge, but you're not going to change somebody's mindset. That unless that really borders into coercion. So I'm going to go back to the congruence word, which is be the change you want to see, as corny as that sounds. And the people who who see that and like it will come along for the ride. It's using the idea of, social virility, which is the people who are believing in the change already are going to be the magnifiers who magnify it. So as the change agent, how do I support those first movers so they can go influence other people in their organization if that's the right thing for them? So I latch on to those people who just love whatever the change is and do anything possible to support them, because they're really going to be the ones that magnify it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, along the same lines of the mindset, I think there's always this like apprehension to change, because I think there's fear, right? Is it threatening your identity to change either what you work or how you think about something? So anytime I'm approaching change in an organization, in a team, in myself, I think you have to pause for a second and say, what's creating that fear? What are those blockers that are coming up? And then, at the same time, say, what's in it for them to change their behavior? And I think that's something that's often missing for a lot of the teams that we coach. We come in with a playbook of things that you should be doing. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to roll out Kanban for all these teams. And here's the reason you should change it. And here's how it's going to make things faster. But again, there's people doing the work, and what's in it for them to change how they work. And I think when you hear developers or anyone in an organization talk through feeling like Agile is something that's being done to them, that's the piece that's missing. And to get them to switch their mindset and be open to this change, I think you have to switch your thinking to approach it with like, what's in it for them? What about these behaviors or this mindset shift will benefit you? And how do you talk to them in a way where you're starting from that position?
Mm-hmm. I think the last thing I would say is, remember, don't use mindset as a stick, because the word gets thrown around a lot, and it's often used as well, my mindset is right, but all y'all's mindset is wrong. And that's just not cool. It's really right. It's such a personal thing. So don't use it as a way to say the way I think is better than the way you think, because we're all different. Like, we all value different levels of structure and security and safety and whatever. So we really need to respect that and make sure we're not trying to tell people they're wrong.
Agile as a weapon. as a weapon.
Oh yeah, I mean, Colleen, you've been in this industry a long time. You've probably seen the same thing, where it's just, you're doing it wrong, or how many articles on LinkedIn do you see about you're doing this wrong and your Agile is wrong and my Agile can beat up your Agile and all this ego-driven stuff, and it's not helpful.
Absolutely. Actually, when I see the word mindset, I don't know why I think automatically in Agile. I think automatically my mind goes to mindset, to Agile. Talking about Agile, according to your expectation and your big expertise, what is the future of Agile right now? How do you see the future according to this mindset or practice, depending of whatever you see it?
I think it's getting blurry in a great way. For all the reasons that Jason just said, I feel like coming up in this industry, there's always been a lot of like, this is the right way, this is the wrong way. You're using the wrong term for this meeting. You're using the wrong, your daily stand up, or it should be a stand up, not a scrum. It should be 15 minutes. You should have 3 questions, not 3 questions. It's a lot of very black and white answers to everything. And it feels like that's shifting in a really healthy way to me, where it doesn't have to be scrum or Kanban. It can be a little bit of both. If you want to use story points, you can, but you don't have to. Just make sure you're breaking the work down in a smart way, right? All these things, I feel like we're really starting to chip away at the core practice to say, what does your team need? What are the things that are going to help your team? That always feels like the right place to be working from. And I'm fortunate to be able to say this, but I've gotten to the point in my career where when I walk into a place and they say, these are the things we want you to teach, we need every team to be doing XYZ thing the same way, I'm usually like, I'm not the right coach for you. Someone out there is, but I'm not the right person. That's not how I'm going to approach working with your organization. And so I think that those fuzzy lines make me feel like we're moving forward in a really productive way that's focusing on the right outcomes for the businesses we work with.
I had a good chat with a potential client years ago with that exact same thing. We're on the phone and they're, okay, when you're gone, how do we make sure that everybody does what you said? And I'm like, oh, you can't. It's impossible. You can't just train them and say, hey, now everybody's going to do the exact same thing. They're not robots. And there was a pause on the line. And then all of a sudden there was, okay, let us think about it. We'll get back to you. Click. And they hung up. But it was, for me, two things are never going to change: competition and innovation. The more we innovate, the more competition we create. And the more competition we create, the more we need to innovate. And that vicious cycle has been around for centuries. So one of the professors I saw speak at a university here said, it was an intrapreneur conference. And I don't think we use that word anymore, intrapreneurship, which is being an entrepreneur inside of an enterprise. Maybe it's still used somewhere, but he said, in 50 years, I'll be dead. That the idea of that term will exist, but it will be called something different, because those two things will never change. That cycle of competition and innovation will never change. So the labels and all the stuff Colleen said that, it doesn't matter about this tool or that tool or whatever, it's what's going to solve the problem. The word agile will go away eventually, and it will get replaced with something else. But we got to look at underneath. If I had to say one thing about what the future would be, I think it would be a lot more gray area in titles and roles. I think will go away, because there's the first web team I worked on, there was 5 of us. And now that is like a half-time job for one person who's in marketing, right? Like it's gone because it's not necessary. Tools made it possible for people to step outside their boundary. So I think that will become a lot more gray. I guess I'd end with the professor said at the end of his talk, teach your kids how to solve problems. Nothing else matters. Like, don't send them into a career to learn the 5 steps to be the best project manager. Teach them how to solve problems, because if they can solve problems in a creative way, they can do anything.
Well, it goes back to what you said about mindset too there, right? It's that open, it's not weaponizing agile to say this is the right way or this is the wrong way, but being open to exploring different ways of doing it. And I think I like what you said about the roles there too. I think that's a really interesting observation. And I also wonder how much of that is a byproduct of moving to remote, right? It's less about filling out a section of the office or having a certain number of people on a team if all of those problems are getting solved by the people that you have contributing to the work.
I love the way that you put it, actually talking about competition and innovation. If think about it, makes me a lot of sense. That's why bring me another question to you. How do you generate great ideas in your organizations right now? Do you have some kind of method? Do you have some kind of events? Or what would you like to recommend us?
We make jokes. We make jokes about mandatory innovation time, which just pokes our brain in a different way, because I actually worked in a company where every other Thursday at 1 p.m. was innovation hour. So they were scheduling their innovation. And of course, that's the first thing to go. So we always make jokes about just, okay, it's time for mandatory innovation time, but it's sporadic. So if somebody has a good idea, we're like, all right, let's skip the plan for today and let's go do something creative. Latch on to the moment when it happens, because there's just a bazillion ideas that flood into our creative brains, and you got to grab it and go with it on the spot. So be open to, I guess, unlocking your creativity when you need to. So, we're not focused on, oh, we didn't get all of our 10 tasks finished this week, therefore we're on a performance review. It's much more fluid. It's much more, we didn't get all the tasks done because we had all these awesome ideas. Now let's take action on those ideas that were better. So we're always open to kind of evolving and changing those things.
Yeah, I think this is a funny question for me, and I've got probably a different answer than I would have 5 years ago, but in building Scatterspoke, which is it's an online retrospective tool, all the things I would go coach a team to do. Now that I'm on the product side and leading a SaaS product, they're really hard to do. I get all these great ideas from working with clients and using the tool at client sites and want to bring those back into the tool. But often I'm wrong. And the most important thing we can do, right, is reach out to customers and talk to them and get feedback on what are they using, what's not working. And it's so funny, you know, Jason and I were talking at the beginning about a talk I did a long time ago around product roadmaps. And one of the things I think in that talk that I mentioned is this concept of prioritization by the hippo in your organization, or the highest paid person's opinion being what's steering what you're going to focus on next. And I'm 100% guilty of that in our own tool. So I think it's been really hard sometimes to say like, well, I don't like the way this works, or this is the thing I think is the most important, but getting out of my own way and letting our users really help us innovate and come up with new ideas. And then I would say the other thing, you know, along the same lines of that is not just getting out of our own way and letting the customer voice really shine, but also new ideas in the space in terms of a new generation of developers, right? So we work with some of the local coding boot camps here to get them involved, and they come in, and it takes a lot of mentoring and getting them up to speed with the platform to be able to contribute, but they often have some really cool ideas. They're new in this space, and they're new often to the agile industry, and they've got great ideas that have contributed to the product. And so sometimes I think getting out of our own way is also inviting fresh eyes to the problem to say, what do you see here as an opportunity to do something different or better in a way that, you know, we never would have even thought of. So that's been a good learning experience.
That's super important. I love that you mentioned that stuff, because that you know, your disposition as a leader filters down on product teams. You know, if you're willing to say, hey, here's a million ideas, I don't know which one's the right one, or I think this is awesome but customers don't, or vice versa, or whatever it is, but being open to talking like that, that's congruence. That's what breeds the creativity with everybody else, because it's okay for somebody to spit out an idea that might end up being stupid, but you never know till you try it. So just leave it all out there, and it'll evolve the way it's going to evolve. We're going through this with our platform now.
Yeah, I was going to say some of my favorite things that have come up in our product in probably the last 3 months have come from an illustrator who's been drawing out canvases for all these different retro templates, and he'll ask questions about, you know, these custom illustrations that he's doing for retros to clarify what exactly does an anchor mean? I don't get what that's supposed to be on a speedboat. And then we'll talk through it, and he'll say, well, like, what if I did it this way? And it's not necessarily an anchor that's on the boat or off the boat, but I don't know. And it pivots the way we're thinking about it, because he's not coming to it with that playbook that we're all used to seeing. And he's challenging the way that we're interpreting something that simple, right? Something as simple as, what does this retrospective canvas look like? And so I love those conversations, because I'm always quick to answer. Maybe not as great about it as what you said, Jason, but I feel like I'll be like, well, no, it's just an anchor off the boat. And then when he starts to ask more questions, I'm like, oh, well, I never thought about it that way. Let's do it. Let's try it. Let's try it and see what people say. So I think it's awesome to have somebody who's going to push you and challenge you that way.
Thank you so much. I would like to recover David Jimenez's question. He asked about, if we don't use agility or agile, our mindset as a weapon towards other people, what could we propose or use to undertake the change of a team? What we could use to do differently if we have some resistance? Actually, Alejandro asked too about it. What happened if the people resist to change, if you don't want to talk directly, or he don't want to be part of the change? What would you like to recommend us?
Well, I'm going to take the opposite answer of what we've been saying. So we've been talking so much about the human side of things and driving, you know, how understanding emotion and drivers and resistance from a human perspective. But when I'm in situations like this, I lean heavily on data. I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I can show you often with data the impacts of the decisions that you're making as an organization or as a team. And I tend to probably give teams more latitude than leadership would like in making decisions that probably aren't going to produce the results that they would expect, because I want them to try things out. And then I can put the data in front of them to say, here's the impact of that choice that you made. Now, does it feel like the right one? What do we want to tweak? I think that's far more powerful than being on a soapbox telling you exactly what you should be doing. And I think if you let the teams have that opportunity to say, like, we want our whip to be 40, and I'm going to go, okay, like, I don't love that for you, but let's give it a shot and see and measure it and come back in a couple of weeks and see if that feels like it's the right amount of work for your team to tackle. They're going to be a lot more bought into that outcome because I gave them the latitude to try something that they felt like was the right decision for them. And if I can quantify that with some data, then I feel like it's easier to fine tune the outcome there. And then I'm not preaching agile to them.
So it was a question, if I summarized it, if we're not going to use mindset as a weapon, how do we help teams change?
Exactly.
Essentially,
yeah, right.
For me, it's stories and social proof. So plenty of times I connect clients to other clients. Like I'll bring a banking client to a telecom client. I was working in this bank and they wanted to, of course, they're undergoing a transformation. They want to redo the entire office plan and the floors and stuff. And they say, well, let's get the quote unquote agile expert to do this for us. And I went, well, this is a lot of work and I'm lazy. So let's go across the street to this one of my other clients and you can see what their space is like. So provide the experiences and social proof from other people so they can see how other people do this. Because often there's the case of that'll never work here because type of thinking. I get this in my workshops too. If I'm doing training on a topic or I tell a story, nobody in the class is going to listen to me. But if somebody else in the class echoes another story, that demonstrates the point they listen to that person. And that's a huge victory. So provide those connections and social proof. So, I used to do Agile Safari in this one big company. Let's just go walk around, let's go to a different building and see what other people are doing. And you make those connections and then they start to help each other and you build stronger networks and communities. And it's much longer game, obviously. So if you're an external consultant, it's hard because you're there for 3 months or 6 months and you kind of have to push results. But you don't realize that the company has the luxury of time in some sense. So they can play the long game and let those connections happen and stuff. So I tend to err more on that side.
Well, Colleen, Jason, pardon, sorry. Thank you so much for your time, your sharing to us, your knowledge. We're really proud of to be here with you. And thank you so much again from all the communities, the Ágiles Latin America be with us. So 1 minute to you to say whatever you want, whatever to share to our attendees. If you want to say something, 1 minute, each of you.
Yeah, I would just say, I'm going to plug Pro Kanban here for a moment. If anybody is interested in getting involved in the Pro Kanban community, one of the most important things that we're doing in that space is mentoring each other. And if you are brand new or have never done Kanban, but you want to learn more about Kanban, if you've been doing Kanban for 20 years and you want to become a trainer, reach out. We want those different voices, different perspectives, and different backgrounds to help make that community stronger. So reach out to Ulysses or myself. We'd love to welcome you.
Jason?
Take care of yourself and the people around you. Everything else will work itself out. If you really truly desire to help organizations, teams, or people be better, every interaction you have with everybody makes a big difference. I mean, you help a Scrum Master enjoy their job more, they're going to be hopefully happier. That's going to filter down to their kids. That's going to filter down to people they interact with, and really focus on those solitary interactions that might not seem like much now, but they make a big difference for people.
Thank you so much. Muchas gracias. Obrigado. Merci, Jason. See you next Zoom.
Thank you.
Brenda. Brenda.
Muchas gracias a todos. Thanks to our presenters. Y a los participantes, los invitamos a que se encuentren en Spatial Chat y si quieren continuar la conversación, y esperamos verles en otras conversaciones.